instrumental. Check us out right here, yo. We are live. Coffee is rapping in the back. Joined by Adam Caratini. And for this special episode, I'm going to let him take over. Adam was on an episode talking about ADHD. I forget what episode number that was. If y'all want to go check out the archives, it's definitely down there. Really fun episode. One of my most listened to episodes, as I think there's a lot of humans out there who are dealing with ADHD, and it brought a lot of good information out. Adam is in Orlando. How you doing over there, my friend, today?
I'm good. Weather's nice. It's like low 70s today. Perfect. How about you?
We had ice everywhere. It was like, it felt like 10 degrees as per the weather app, and it was hard to walk because everywhere it was misty, and then it was 10 degrees, so it was icy. It was cool. It was a good adventure, you know. Walking the dog just keeps you on your toes, working agility and things like that, which we're going to talk about some of those different training methodologies today.
Absolutely. I don't miss that at all, by the way.
Yeah, that's what Floridians, you're a true Floridian, true warm weather baby.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so I'm going to hand it over to you. We're going to turn Puffy and Biggie off. And you, I'll set this guess is Adam's kind of going through, we're talking about nerding out on programming and different ways to deal with different avatars, and then how to factor in injury risks and different training concepts. So that's my big overarching kind of intro to this whole topic. And I think I'll just hand it over to you and let you go and rock and roll with it. And then I'm here for you, man.
Awesome. Yeah. We've been looking forward to doing this for a while. I don't know if the listeners know, but you're my coach. You've been my coach for a long time. You're helping heal my hip. And you're probably the first person I go to when I have any of these questions. So just wanted to talk through a couple avatars and different training styles now that I'm exploring different training styles, and see your opinion on all that.
Let's do it.
All right. So first we'll talk about the avatars. We're going to have two. One is a 35-year-old male, did CrossFit for a while, got injured a couple times, so stopped doing CrossFit and is now looking for what to do next. And he'll be working out at a traditional gym. Then the second avatar is 53-year-old female, looking for weight loss, starting the beginning stages of menopause, has done yoga in the past, did spin, didn't really stick with any of them, didn't see results, is putting on weight year by year, and is looking for some help. You are the coach. So we're going to just talk about some do's and some don'ts and some different training styles and what's appropriate for each of the avatars.
Okay. And I'm just for the listeners, as we go back and forth between the avatars, I'm able to pull it up on the screen here. So I got the first one there, 35-year-old male. If you're listening, because this will be on audio also, it might be a little harder to keep up, but I'm going to do our best to keep you guys with everything. So go for it, man. I'm just putting the avatars up on the screen.
All right. Okay. So first question is for the 35-year-old male. Because he got injured, he actually hurt his knee. He still has some lower back pain, just working at high intensity, not some great coaching. And is it okay for him to train through pain? And how much pain is too much? And we'll just start there.
So the question is, how much pain is okay to train through?
Yes, for this 35-year-old male avatar.
All right. So, and I'm because we're talking in generalities and all sorts of fun stuff here, just for the sake of the disclaimer, legal disclaimer is this is for informational purposes only, all that good stuff. I'm going to say anytime there's any kind of aches, pains, any good facility should have Bo on staff who can do an assessment. And again, I can do this all virtually. So there should never be any pain, and aches and pains. The sentence I'm going to throw out here is listen to the whispers before they become yells. Then we get into the question of some people can train through some pain. I'm dealing with a little finger injury myself here. And so how much rock climbing should I do? Should I not rock climb for 6 weeks, or should I put a splint on it and do the best I can to kind of train through that? For general purposes, I'm going to say A, get assessed by someone who you trust. B, there are some things that you can train through, but now again, we should take a huge step back when there are aches and pains and try to figure out, especially if this specific avatar had been in CrossFit, gotten injured, and now left. So the answer to your question, as best I can put it down, is he needs to make sure that, again, that's getting addressed as much as possible, because otherwise he's going to keep getting hurt.
Great. I am a 35-year-old male that did get injured doing a clean. Now we're healing my hip from it, but it was years and years of beating my body up. First assessment that we did in New York, that was probably 4 years ago, told me to stop training and start addressing this, and I didn't. And then it got worse, and now we're trying to heal up as best as we can, but completely understand what you're saying with that. And it all comes down to assessment. How bad is it? Everyone is completely different.
Right.
But unless you're getting assessed, no one really knows.
Right. And even for myself, I'll bring myself into this. I mean, again, I mentioned my finger injury here. I've definitely got some tendon, anger stuff that happens from time to time. I'm able to manage that. And again, if that happens multiple days in a row, or if it's getting past a certain point, I know when I can stop that. And if I'm working with somebody, we need to educate that client, patient, as much as possible to figure out, again, how to listen to the whispers before they become yells. Again, if that analogy is not clear enough for anybody, that's listen to the little aches and pains before they become like serious injuries. So let's be very clear on that one.
All right. And that was the only question that didn't have both avatars, because we're assuming that the 53-year-old female avatar is actually completely healthy, doesn't have any injuries. So the next question is cardio. And this is a question that so many people have. What's best? Steady state cardio or HIIT training? Is it mixed modal? Is it cyclical? So I just wanted to know what your take is on that for both avatars.
All right, let's take them one at a time. We'll stick with our 35-year-old male. I'm going to keep that up on there. So he was injured, and now he just wants to look better. So for somebody who wants to look better, short-term results, and there's a recent, I'll shout out Chasing Excellence, Ben Bergeron's podcast. I know you're a fan as well. They just did like short-term versus long-term success when it comes to what you're looking for, what you're chasing. So when we're talking about wanting to look better, and if that's really where this guy's at, 35-year-old, again, we didn't talk if he's single, if he's looking to find a partner, things like that, right? But looking good usually is important for a 35-year-old male to some extent. So in that situation, when we're talking about cardio, I'm going to have two takes on this. One take is probably the best thing is to mix in a lot of high intensity stuff, because that's probably going to get us to look better naked faster. And it just needs to be put in there wisely. The second one, though, the other kind of side of that coin, where you can still get really good results and build on your health and look good in the short term, maybe a little bit slower results, but you're still going to get good results that are more consistent and last longer. I'm going to give credit to Dr. Andy Galpin here, and they had a great podcast that unfortunately they stopped doing. I don't remember the name of that podcast right now, but
No, he was on Barbell Shred, or no?
He was on there from time to time. He was definitely in that cycle. No, but they had their own very well put together, just very scientific storytelling kind of thing. Anyway, but one thing that I took away from him is pretty much every human should focus on this concept every week. And again, this is basic maintenance and like very generic. And again, we'll go to our 35-year-old avatar. So have one high intensity day, and that means like go all out and collapse on the floor at the end of it. Traditional CrossFit, if you want to call it that. Have a very long, slow endurance type event, whatever that is. Cardio, steady state. That was the other way you kind of phrase it, right? Have both of them in there, because now we're talking constantly varied. Mixed modalities, however we want to talk about that, functional fitness. And then the third one would be kind of in that 20-minute AMRAP, as many rounds and reps as possible, kind of 80% effort, 75% effort, however we want to think about that. So having those three in there, and if you hit that every week for a year, you're going to be doing pretty well. And again, at the end of the day, when it comes to all these questions, and Adam sent me a bunch of these questions in advance, and when we look at each of these concepts, at the end of the day, consistency is really the most important thing to me. All things work, right? Again, Orange Theory works to some extent. Zumba works to some extent. They all are going to have plateaus, they're going to have limitations. But if you stay consistent with any kind of movement practice, there's just different ways to look at that. So yeah, coming back to it, I like those three. And I wanted to shout out another person I follow is Tony Gentlecore, who's one of the top personal trainers in that space. He writes a lot on his website and things like that. So he used to be on Breaking Muscle and all these other T-Nation, if folks are familiar with all that. So, but one of his terms that I love and I want to steal and give him credit for is the 3 sets of 52 or 3 by 52, which is if you work out pretty good 3 times a week for 52 weeks, that's the whole year. At the end of that year, you're gonna be doing pretty well. So whatever that system is, whether it's high intensity interval training, whether it's steady state cardio, there's definitely got to be something there. So as long as there's consistency, basically is where we're coming back to it.
Yeah, and I'll touch on that as well. Enjoyment has to fit in there, because if we want to do it for a long time, we can't hate what we're doing, or we're just going to stop doing it or burn out. So if it's something that you enjoy and something that brings you joy, it probably doesn't necessarily matter as much what you're doing. Like if you enjoy Orange Theory and you enjoy the community and you enjoy working out with your friends, do it. I don't think the best training in the world, but you're still being active, more active than most people.
Right.
So how about for the 53-year-old female?
So yeah, again, what's that? What's that?
We probably should have gave them names, but
yeah, we can do that at some point. Would you like to name our 53-year-old right now?
Susan.
All right, so Susan, our 53-year-old female, or the question again is, what's better for her, high intensity interval training versus steady state cardio? So she's done some spins, she's done some yoga. Spin generally is kind of steady state cardio. So she's already tried that. So if I'm having a conversation with Susan, my encouragement here again is if we're choosing between the two, and again, that's a very extreme choice. I would say for her, let's get some high intensity interval training in there, where again, by I'm just defining that as like you're pushing your limits, you're uncomfortable for a little bit, as again, we kind of share our connection over James Fitzgerald here, and one of his quotes is get comfortable with the uncomfortable. So at that age, 53, we're probably thinking about hormonal issues for Susan. We want to start managing some of that. And again, for sure, aging female, because of the hormonal issues, we're thinking of osteoporosis, bone issues, things like that. High intensity type work will, in fact, improve a lot of those concepts between osteoporosis, between aging better, hormonal implications. So the high intensity would be the better of the two in my book. Again, I go back to the Dr. Andy Galpin thing of let's have a little bit of steady state in there for her long-term health. But the high intensity thing, and the thing with the high intensity thing, and this is where CrossFit kind of, again, we're both kind of from that CrossFit space. For those listening, if you're not familiar, CrossFit preaches on, or kind of goes off the fact that if you really address your high intensity interval training, you're actually building your engine long term. So steady state is not necessarily the thing that you need to be doing all the time if you want to build the biggest engine that you can. So again, we're talking about a lot of big picture concepts here, and trying to synthesize a lot of strength and conditioning type research, exercise physiology into kind of small bite-sized nuggets for Susan.
So is there, just because of stuff that I have read, if you do too much high intensity, it could release, let's say, cortisol in the body, which is stress hormones, and can cause more hormonal issues, especially for Susan. who is probably already going through some hormonal issues, would you say that there's a point where there's too much HIIT training?
Yep, 100%. Yes. Just like there can be the same thing with doing steady state too much. You know, we see it with endurance runners, the same kind of concept. So for sure, any kind of exercise is releasing cortisol and things like that. So yeah, 100% high intensity. That's why, again, when the question is which of the two is better, she's tried some yoga, she's tried some spin with minimal results. So that's where I'm saying a little bit of that high intensity. Again, everything should be properly dosed for sure.
Yeah.
We can't just say go do CrossFit or go do and you know, people, again, I think we were talking about this on another call, was you know, people get into Barry's boot camp or whatever thing that's super fun and exciting and they love it, and then they go 6 times a week and they're not recovering right and they're not eating right and they're not sleeping right. And at the end of the day, again, the big thing, taking a huge step back here, is the eating right, the sleeping right, the breathing exercises are actually going to do more for everyone's health, but they're just a lot less sexy. And everyone's like, well, I still want to get my high intensity interval. I want to go run for an hour, or do a spin class. And like, that's the stuff people care about. But the truth is, if they're not doing all the basic stuff, then yeah, what are we're talking about the wrong stuff to some extent. But for the sake of this conversation, we can keep it here.
James Fitzgerald actually talks a lot about that, the cortisol drip, you know, and you just being addicted to the feeling of dying on the floor after a workout, which I was for a really long time, and how that is an issue. You know, people, you'll find addiction in anything, right? So that's just another form of addiction, but it's not necessarily a good relationship with fitness.
Right, and that's where I'm just going off of Susan here. I'm not worried about her getting there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And if she does go there, again, if we're working together, I can say, hey, Susan, I noticed like you've been in here 6 days in a row. Like maybe we need to check in on, again, sleep, stress, whatever else is going on. So for sure, that's it. That's a whole nother kind of caveat.
Awesome. Now we're going to get into some gains, some hypertrophy talk, time under tension, tempos, rest, and what's best for both of these avatars. We'll call the male avatar Mike. So I've been playing around with different training styles as of recent, doing some Poliquin work, and I'm just looking at full body resistance. So training each part of the body every day, let's say 3 to 4 times a week, so you can get more volume but less stress on the body, because you're splitting it up over days versus splitting the body up. Let's say Monday, upper body, Tuesday, lower body, Wednesday, you take a day off, Thursday, upper body, Friday, lower body, you take the weekend off. Which do you think would be best for both of these avatars? Can you hear?
Sorry, I'm going to ask you to talk for like 5 more seconds while I let my dog into the room.
Yeah, no problem. All right. So full body resistance is training every pattern, let's say 3 to 4 times a week.
I'm back, folks. I'm back.
For lower body.
Dog wanted to get in the room. Can't argue with the dog.
No.
So sorry, let's summarize that. I'll try to summarize based on what I understood. So we're back to Mike, 35-year-old male, wants to look better, former CrossFit guy, got injured, wants to figure out what's next. And you're asking, between the two, we have the two different concepts of full body resistance, which is working functional movement patterns, right? Heavy resistance generally, versus more an isolated body split, which we see in a lot of traditional men's health type situations of upper body, whatever, Monday and Thursday, lower body, Tuesday and Friday. That's where we're at. So for Mike, I think specifically I think he's because he's done CrossFit. We didn't talk about how long he's done CrossFit and things like that. Maybe he only did it for a couple months, but we're going to assume he's got a little bit more of a training age. And so I think the full body is probably better for him. Before we went on this call, again, because we have this avatar and we didn't go too deep into the rabbit hole on it, we talked about a beginner type athlete. And again, all these avatars are different levels of athlete, whether, again, they're participating in a sport, the sport of life, the sport of fitness. So beginner, intermediate, and advanced are kind of three ways we can look at that. So I'll just break it down almost as that, because we did this a little bit before we went live. But beginner person, I think the isolated kind of thing is actually probably a little better in some regard, because they can then get that exposure, have and again, we're talking traditional Globo gym type situation, Planet Fitness or Equinoxes or whatever, New York Sports Club. And because you're doing these very safe machines, right, you're just kind of getting a decent stimulus. Again, as long as there's some kind of linear progression. I literally had a friend, not to go too far off the avatar, a friend messaged me a few days ago. Basically, she was just following the same routine every day of this kind of split, but she wasn't increasing the weight, and it was kind of getting easy, which is what's happening. Your body adapts. So there's a concept called specific adaptations to impose demands, the SAID principle, SAID. So coming all the way back to Mike, the 35-year-old male, he is, I would say, the full body kind of splits, right? So he's doing the movement patterns. That's going to give him more bang for his buck. If we're then switching over to Susan, the 53-year-old female, Susan, I think, is probably going to benefit. Oh, and Adam is gone. I think he's going to jump back on. He's having some issues. Hey, we got a few folks listening. So we're talking about Susan, and probably better for her is at the end of the day, I want everyone to get to that FBR, the full body resistance. Adam, you there?
Yes, sir. I got kicked off.
Right.
I'm back.
Okay. Welcome back. So I was saying for Susan, I think that, again, depending on her level of comfort, again, we didn't really talk about how comfortable these guys are. So one of the things for me, the way I look at clients and when I do assessments is I'm looking my 3 C's. I think it's backwards. Is that which way is the right C? It's hard for me to. My brain doesn't work. Anyway, so I look at competence in the basic movement patterns. So if the person, the client, Susan, Mike, can demonstrate competence in all of these movement patterns, then I think they should move into FBR. And we come back to the concept of assessment. If they can demonstrate good competence, then we go to confidence. And if I'm confident with you loading up some weight with a split stance squat or a lunge pattern, then yeah, we need to go there. And like, that's going to be the best thing for every human, almost every human, depending on goals. But if we're talking about longevity, we're talking about joint health, all these concepts, I think that competence is vital. And then, sorry, confidence, and then we go to capacity, which is just, let's train this, and you could train that for the rest of your life. So I would definitely get there with Susan. If Susan or Mike came into my door tomorrow, I would, based on the assessment, go to that. But if we're talking about them in the world and they happen to be listening and they don't have access to folks like you or I, although we are available online, but if they just chose to, or we're talking to the trainer of that person, then yeah, again, I think that I want everyone to get to that kind of full body resistance concept. I think the appropriate place for splits for me is if you just care about aesthetics and you don't care about joint health as much, because you're not working full range of motion as much. And again, it's kind of limited in what it can do. So when you're talking about hypertrophy, when you're talking about functional bodybuilding with Marcus Philly and things like that, we're getting into some different concepts there that it opens up a lot of cans of worms and tangents. So I'm just going to bring it back to say everyone should do FBR.
Love that. Recently started playing around with full body resistance. One, it's more efficient because you can do a lot of supersets, trisets, different body parts. While one body part's resting, you can work another body part. It's just more efficient, getting more work done in a shorter amount of time. And it's just more enjoyable. And, like these long, I would do bench press every Monday, like everyone else, and I'd have to wait 3 minutes and look at my phone and then have to do another set. And it just wasn't fun anymore. So definitely brought some fire back into training, which is good.
I'll just say real quick on that too. I mean, and again, we're not here to hype up CrossFit or anything, but just from a functional, the term functional, again, goes back to, and I always remember this concept when I was first getting indoctrinated into the cult of CrossFit. The guy Dan Bailey, for anyone who's seen him, he's a pretty jacked dude. And they did a video of like, you don't do bicep curls because you have really good biceps. What do you do for biceps? And he's just like, here, let me show you. And he's just doing a bunch of pull-ups. Yeah. And yeah, at the end of the day, like you're hitting those bigger, more complex muscles and you're burning more fat and you're being more efficient with your time and you're still getting the results that we're looking for. Again, CrossFitters don't do a lot of sit-ups. Maybe there's some GHD type stuff, but they're not doing those sit-ups to get good looking abs. They're doing, again, it becomes the quote that I'll give credit to Greg Glassman for of, if you chase aesthetics, you rarely catch it. And it's really hard to keep chasing that. But if you chase fitness and have a good definition of fitness, you're going to have aesthetics almost as a side effect. So that's something that, again, I do still stand by, and I've experienced myself, and I really, again, I implement into my philosophy of programming and training.
Awesome. And that's going to bring me to my next question. And this is actually a question we didn't talk about. But 35-year-old male, we both have a CrossFit background. 35-year-old male, would you recommend him jumping back into CrossFit? And would you recommend Susan jumping into CrossFit?
Awesome. Good segue. So for the 35-year-old male who has an injury history, again, these avatars for me, I hate, again, I know you're married too, but anytime hypotheticals that come up, I'm like, it frustrates me to all heck. Cause I'm like, well, just like, give me all the answers, cause I need a lot of information. Yeah. I'm trying to synthesize all of this information. So I'm going to try to answer it the best I can. And sorry, my dog keeps wanting to play ball here. So what for him, I don't think I'd want him to go back, especially if he got injured and left. I mean, again, if he tells me I want to get back to it, sure, I'll say totally doable. It totally is reasonable. But I'm not going to push him if he's like, "What do you think? Should I get back into CrossFit?" I'm going to say I don't know. But at the end of the day, for me to answer for both of these avatars, I do think CrossFit. And I know you listened to my podcast I just did on the Demand Better podcast here, kind of debating with my buddy Corona, who's a personal trainer and has a lot of negative things to say about CrossFit. I still do believe strongly that CrossFit is probably the best generalized fitness, and again, generalized physical preparedness program. So for people who want long-term health, I think CrossFit is probably still one of the best answers that we can give them, short of one-on-one individual design, short of, again, or as supplement for that program can be having frequent check-ins with a physical therapist, a doctor of physical therapy who understands the sport, the demands, and longevity. And this is why you see a lot of physical therapists or chiropractors setting up in CrossFits and rent space there. So because it's a great fitness program, when you fill in those gaps, there's some natural gaps that happen there, based on some coaches not being as high level as possible, based on a lot of different things. And again, no program is perfect. So that's my long ramble on that. And go check out my episode of Demand Better podcast.
I did listen to that episode, and I did send you.
Yes, you did.
After, yes. It's hard for me to fully agree, in it specifically because I've just seen at this point. I think you were spoiled with a lot of amazing boxes. I met you at Fifth Ave.
And again, I'll add in for sure the caveat, and we have a guy who just touched base in the comments who's a CrossFit hater as well. But what's up, Kenton? But I'll add in, yes, for sure. The caveat needs to be when we say CrossFit, and this is what my entirety of that podcast is when you're talking about CrossFit, there's the methodology of CrossFit versus the implementation. And yes, for sure, I've been spoiled with it. I'm again below one. I'm a 1%er. A level 3 coach, all these things. But Kenton, you hate it. He said he doesn't hate it. He hated the organization. We're going to put that out publicly. That's fine. But yeah, there's always issues there for sure. So yeah, to answer that finally, I'm going to say, again, I would put the caveat of, hey, go see Bobby at CrossFit Fifth Ave, which I don't even know if that exists anymore, but or he's up at Home Base, I think in Massachusetts now. So go see Bobby at Home Base, and I feel confident that if you go there, you're going to have a good experience. And again, he understands these concepts, and if there's ever an injury, an issue, a limitation, I know that he's going to send you back to me or whatever the situation is. So yes, that is for sure 100% a caveat. I'm not saying everyone should go do any CrossFit anywhere. There is no standardization. There is no, and this is why, if anyone not familiar, Rob Wolf and Greg Everett in 2009 at the Black Box Summit is now this infamous thing where they stood up and they were like, hey, you guys aren't going to put like any restrictions on this thing. And they were like, nope, we're going to let it all fly. And they were like, yeah, we're out. Peace. And that's when those guys were like, yeah, they're out. And Castro called Greg Everett all sorts of names apparently. And yeah, anyway, long story short, CrossFit is not for everybody. However we want to phrase it, there's a lot of nuance and caveats to that conversation. But as a training methodology, I still stand by the definition. And again, whatever you think of Greg Glassman and some of his controversial stuff, I'm able to put that to the side and say the methodology is still, I think, one of the best concepts and ways that we can now move somebody into long-term health, fitness, and chase that capacity for a very, very long time. So whether it's Susan or Mike, I think that if they can follow that program in their garage, they don't have to go to a CrossFit affiliate. They can go to a functional fitness space that probably is doing CrossFit, but again, might even be doing CrossFit better than CrossFit Orlando, or I'm going to pick on them. I have one of their shirts somewhere in that closet right there.
I got my
anyway. There you
go. But I agree with you as a methodology. Like my favorite thing that happened to CrossFit is when they were almost about to get rid of the sport and they were posting videos of Susan squatting to a couch. I was like, all right, this is what people need. Like there is training for sport, which is the opposite of training for longevity, and people need to understand that. So yeah, I agree. As a methodology, it's sad that the methodology isn't necessarily practiced a lot, mainly because people want fast results. People want that cortisol drip. People want the new shiny toy. And as a coach, it's difficult to say no to that person. As an owner, it's difficult to say no to that person when they're the ones paying your bills. So understand. Completely understand.
And I'm going to add in this other piece too, with again that community aspect. And I don't think there's very few things out there that are as good of a community as what Kenton here's quote is. I made more friends through CrossFit as an adult than I did my entire childhood. Yeah, and again, like I can look through my phone right now, and probably more folks in there are from kind of some version of CrossFit. I still keep in touch with a lot of my high school football buddies and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely a huge component. You mentioned earlier, it's got to be fun. And that community, that accountability. If you're always going to the whatever 11:30 lunchtime class, and then you're not there for a few days, people are like, hey, where's Adam? Like, what's going? Like, has anyone heard from Adam? Like, what's going on? People care. People start to check in on you. So there's a lot of power there for sure.
And also just the ability to play. Like I didn't play sports growing up. So I discovered CrossFit when I was 26 years old, and I've never played. So learning new skills, developing, I would spend 4 hours a day at Fifth Ave just because it was so fun. And that was an aspect of my life that I didn't explore, that I think everyone should explore playing.
Yeah, and that's again where the methodology is the piece of that, where it's learn and play new sports is part of that methodology. And what that turned into from you have 15,000 affiliates is we're going to play dodgeball with 20-pound balls. And it's like, that's not learning and playing new sports, so yeah, it was carried out poorly in a lot of ways. But yeah, exploring, walking on your hands and handstand walks or bear crawls or wall walks and like all these different things, jumping on rings and gymnastics. At the end of the day, again, whether it's Susan or Mike, our avatars, I think that at the end of the day, I would definitely encourage them in those situations based on their histories and everything like that. There's definitely a way to get them back to CrossFit. having that conversation though of like, what's their screening process? What's their coaching like? How many times did Coach Bobby come over and give you a cue in that hour? If it's anything less than like 5, then maybe that's not the place for you. Again, there's different ways we can structure that, those bumpers, so to speak, around what that is.
I like it. All right, we'll move on. Next, we're just going to talk a little bit about specifics around strength training now. And the first one is time under tension. And it's probably something that's just ignored for your typical person going to the gym, and they're not understanding time under tension, and they're on the bench press and they're trying to rep out as many reps as they can at a certain weight. Let's say Mike, you're programming for him and you're writing a prescription, and it is his first month, so we're looking at progression. And so it's the first week of his program. What would his time under tension look like? For let's even throw out a specific exercise. Let's say you prescribe the bench press. What would his time under tension look like?
I very likely would not subscribe or prescribe bench press.
No.
Say that, no.
Okay. Tell me why.
Again, depends on his goals, all that stuff. I would just say the majority of my clients, I do not prescribe bench press. I don't think it's that useful. I think it has a lot of ways I look at stuff is risk versus reward. I don't see it as the most rewarding thing. Again, if he wants to have a good looking pectoral base and chest, and also maybe because I did way too much benching in my high school days. I know Kenton on here listening, and he's a bodybuilding type guy. So if he wants to chime in about bench press, he can certainly defend or support it or whatever. But even let's say he wanted to do bench press and that was the prescription. Time under tension for me, to come back to your kind of main question, it comes down to 2 real things and reasons why I prescribe or don't prescribe it. Number 1 is tendon health. So for me, again, in my assessment and in the history taking, depending on their sport, depending on their training age, and again, we didn't go that deep on Mike the Avatar here, but when I look at someone's bicep tendon and I can poke in there, a lot of times, again, especially if he's a desk worker and he's a weekend warrior kind of guy, the tendons tend to be less than healthy. If I wanted to go really deep, I would get a diagnostic ultrasound and I can look under an actual thing, the technology, and I can look at his tendon and say, hey, your tendon's not that healthy. So if that's the case, then the time under tension becomes our medicine. And that time under tension is what's going to fix the tendon. Now, even if he doesn't have an issue, for the general population, without assessing somebody, I think that proper dosing of time under tension will improve our tendon health. So tendon health is huge for me. It's one of the things I think as a physical therapist, as a trainer in the fitness space, that I love putting together into the right dosages. So for me, that really general, again, kind of time under tension is going to be 4 seconds down, 3 seconds up, whether it's bench press, push-ups, whatever else. And that's something I would say too, is I would much sooner go to a push-up. And if push-ups are too easy, even tempo push-ups are too easy, I want to perfect that because I want to get full body engagement before I go to the bench press. Because I find this particular pattern is not that useful. Whereas a push-up on the floor is something he can do any given time, on vacation, all that good stuff. So I think it's a much more powerful pattern. And even with the bench press, I would rather have a neutral grip. That's another caveat to that whole thing, since we're talking about bench press. But again, I would take the push-up and do tempo work there for sure. And then I would do it on the rings, which again, OPEX is a huge fan of. And I loved progressing through playing on the rings and doing that, because I feel like that's giving us a lot more joint health. That takes me to the second part of time under tension. And when we're working on time under tension, and again, if you guys have ever done this listening at home, if you're doing pauses at the bottom, you kind of know how much that can suck, especially with heavy weight and things like that. So now we're talking about kind of durability, resilience, whatever terms you want to use. anti-fragility. So when we're talking about loading you in certain ways, the range of motion and then the kind of that durability piece are things I would want to do. You mentioned for Mike, we're in that first week of training. So I don't want to go that heavy. I want to just get him moving, get him exposed to probably lighter things than he's even, capable of, but I just want to see how he tolerates some of those things. So again, I would definitely want to do some possible pauses at the bottom, whether it's again a push up or a bench press, or it's on the rings. What do you want, dog? She's freaking out over here. Sorry. So I like doing that range of motion piece where again, people aren't used to being at that full depth range of motion. They're used to kind of cheating their way through reps. So I would certainly challenge some positional awareness. I would challenge some of those things where, again, especially if we're having that conversation, whether we're in person, whether I'm sending someone these workouts online, at the end of the day, for me, there's just all these different factors that I'm thinking about of how do I want to incorporate them in. So as per usual, I don't have an easy, simple answer for you.
No, and that was great information. And I understood 4 seconds on the way down, 3 seconds on the way up. So let's say Mike's training age, he did 4 years of CrossFit, played college football, did weightlifting in high school. So his training age is pretty large,
okay.
But broken up over time, got married, hasn't trained in a while, and is now trying to get back into it. So I've always played around with, let's say, explosive on the way up or maximum 2 seconds on the way up. Why would we go for 3 seconds on the way up? Just so I can understand.
Sure. So especially if he has a decent training age, especially because you're mentioning it's his first week or so, I want to work and build up his capacity and his positional strength and his durability, all these kind of words that we're talking about. When we're getting to explosive type stuff, that to me is a much more advanced, and I want to feel really confident with his joint health, with his kind of progression of strength. So the 4 and 3, the 4 seconds down, 3 seconds up comes from a lot of research around tendon health specifically. And again, assuming he's coming into this with already some injuries and things like that. And again, even that training age that we added just now of the college career, the 4 years of CrossFit. 4 years of CrossFit for sure. I'm concerned that he's got some tendon issues because it just tends to overload a lot of tendons in a lot of the wrong ways, and it doesn't have enough time under tension because it's not sexy. Because it doesn't leave you walking out of there feeling like you necessarily got like the intended thing. So there's very few CrossFit gyms that I've seen that do a decent amount of incorporating time under tension, so to speak. So that's my rationale for the 4 seconds down, 3 seconds up. I like your concept about kind of working explosive type stuff. And for sure, long term, I want to work that in for him, but it's got to be put in there to me at the right times. So the way I look at, and this is another, this goes way back to like I want to say like 90s strength and conditioning guys. Is you first want to just make sure when you're teaching or learning anything new, any kind of stuff, you just have to show me you can be in those positions. Then you need to show me you can move through that pattern. So let's continue with the bench press, right? Can you go and comfortably have your, thumb into your armpit? And the camera's always backwards here. But yeah, do you have that shoulder extension to even go into that position? Again, most people don't. As a physical therapist, most people I've assessed do not. So do you have the position to go through the full range of whatever the exercise that we're talking about is? Then can you move through that position without any resistance? All right. So just the movement. Can you do that movement and engage kind of the right muscles as best as we can kind of break that down, without any major faults? And then you can add a little bit of speed. Okay, cool. Do it with a broomstick and show me you can do 5 reps at a good click before we put on 400 pounds or whatever. And then, and only then, when you can show me position, movement, speed. So slow movement, speed movement. Now, then finally you've earned the right to put on some weight in my kind of book there.
You did that with me.
Yep.
9 years ago.
I do that with everyone. It's just
so the listeners know, I walked into Fit That for the first time. It was back squat day. Tried to load up under the bar, did a half squat with my knees forward, and you said, take the weight off the bar, handed me a PVC pipe, and you said, you're working with this. And I had been training for a while. So I'm glad you did that, because I could have got really severely injured.
Yeah. And again, like the joke or and this is something that, again, I liked about CrossFit overall, is, it said, leave your ego at the door. And again, like people, and we used to joke at the very beginning of CrossFit, when it was very like Fight Club, underground, whatever, is like, there's an asshole filter that, if you go into a CrossFit, and the coaches are probably at that time like really listening to, because there's only so many people out there putting out what CrossFit is, and that's going to include Coach Greg Glassman. So they were the ones saying like, this needs to be done this way, and there was a higher standard, and the further and the more diluted it got, that's what gave it a lot of its negative kind of, and it grew a lot of ways. So there's a lot of positives and negatives to that. Anyway, this doesn't have to be a CrossFit podcast.
I get it. All right. So Susan.
Time under tension. For Susan, again, we mentioned earlier, 53-year-old female, hormonal things going on, probably. We're looking at bone strength, durability for sure. So when it comes to time under tension, same thing for me is we want to see if she can get those positions. Joint health, she might have a little bit more limitations in joint health, although if she's done yoga, maybe she's a little bit more flexible in some ways. So again, it's going to depend on some of those factors. But first week, time under tension. And again, I don't tend to introduce time under tension too early. I just want to see that they can move through some of these concepts. But then, if we're going to jump to time under tension early on, I would probably stick to a very similar kind of 4-3 or 3-4, whatever way we want to talk about that. As we move on more to an advanced period, again, when we were talking about, I'd like the explosive components that you're talking about, but at the same time, I actually also like these kind of for better health and feeling more durable, just like 10 seconds down, and like a legitimate 10 seconds, put a clock in front of you. Don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which some people do, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I've definitely seen people who do 10-second descents in 4 or 5 seconds. And I'm like, but when I used to get those, it's a really good way. And so for those not familiar, let's talk about real simple strength and conditioning concept of eccentrics. So when you're lowering down, you can lower a lot more weight than you can bring back up. So if we're talking about a bench press, again, if I put 500 pounds on the bar, I probably can lower it to my chest confidently.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I probably right now today could not push more than 250 pounds off of my chest. I don't love bench press. I don't do a lot of bench press. But I still have some versions of it in my body. But again, the eccentric, concentric is pretty important to understand. And we can break down a lot more muscle and also, again, overload your nervous system with eccentrics. But it's important to understand that, hey, you're just going to lower that down. You're not standing that up. And where does that belong? Again, that's a much more advanced kind of concept for me. And again, I wouldn't give that to Susan. I might give that much sooner to Mike, but it wouldn't be in the first week. But that's stuff that I would figure out how that fits into his entire kind of system there.
Yeah, with let's say Susan, I have a lot of 53-year-old females at the gym that I currently work for. I work for Eat the Frog, and I do a lot of negative work. Where let's say we're working on the push-up and they can't do a push-up even on their knees, we might just slowly lower ourselves down on our knees, and then we're peeling ourselves up, and we're still working on the negative strength, and then just trying to get back to the top of that movement. And I have found it extremely effective for building strength. We have pull-ups in this week's program, and then people are going up to, we have racks where you can actually stand on a rack, so they're able to get up to the top of the pull-up bar, slowly lower themselves down, and still work on that strength without working on the concentric portion of the harder concentric portion of that exercise. And they're building strength. Love eccentric work, especially tempo is eccentric work. So I like it. I'll
add to that real quick though. Again, being around CrossFit, especially for a number of years, seeing people really focus a little, almost too much on that, the eccentrics. I think that, again, it needs to be as personalized, individualized as possible, because, again, some folks are going to plateau very quickly on the eccentrics. And again, some of it's neurological, just your brain learns that, as much as there's muscle, actual muscle breaking down and growing, the eccentrics alone, we need to factor in, and again, this goes back to training age and all these other concepts we keep bringing up. But to me, I've just seen people focus a little too much on that and not enough to bring in the concentrics. At some point, you need to bring in the concentric. So for some people, it might need to be sooner than later, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and so the progression for a negative would be progression. So you're doing a eccentric. Let's say we're talking the push-up eccentric, and then at the top you're doing a plank hold. So we can still work on that core strength. We can still work on that stability, and that would be phase 2. Then how would you start working the concentric if they don't have the strength to get out of the push-up? Susan.
For Susan, if she doesn't have the strength to get out of the push-up, again, I might stay in the eccentric for 3 weeks. Again, I'm overgeneralizing really simply, but and then if she's not able, I'll test, and how much can you do that? Okay, if you can't, we're gonna go and change the angle. So there's a bunch of different factors and really basic strength and conditioning. Let's go through all the variables you can change to modify any exercise. So it's the angle of the body. So now you could do it at, I'm doing it right now. I'm up against the window and I can do a push-up up against the window. So I can still work the concentric, but I'm going to have to find the right amount of stimulus and challenge for her. So maybe I need to go to a 45-degree angle for her and have her do push-ups there, or ring push-ups, where, again, now she's able to work through a more natural range of motion. So there's all these different ways to factor that in. Again, for Susan, it's going to see what her limitation is and where can we get her to feel confident and feel that progress so she can move forward. Where, again, sometimes the easy answer might be just keep doing eccentrics. But the right answer might, or the better answer, and that's kind of what I think we should always be chasing, right, is the better answer. And what's more appropriate for Susan might be, hey, let's incorporate in some concentric work somewhere, and however we can have her feel good about that so that she stays motivated and things like that.
And that's why I like the idea of hiring someone like you or like me, because I've been in group fitness where there's 30 people in a class, and I guarantee you that's not happening. They're going to work eccentric for a very, very long time because they have 30 people to get to in an hour.
And
for 10 minutes.
Right. And again, like I said, a little speaking to my experience there is the fact that, I see a lot of people get stuck there and they don't have anyone to individually progress them appropriately. And then they never really maybe they get one pull up or whatever, that goal that they had, but it just doesn't, it's not the full picture. So I've just seen a lot of people who unfortunately like either didn't get to their goal or kind of could have gotten a lot further with their training, and it's an incomplete picture. But that's the thing everyone's looking for, even kind of what you're doing to me here. You're looking for that answer. I appreciate that. It's a little more than that we're doing here. We're going through an exercise and we're talking about a lot of different variables, but at the end of the day, everyone wants that, like, what's my pull-up program? How do I go from 0 to 1 pull-ups? There's a bunch of ways we can do that, but then again, what's the best way? Just like if I'm driving from Orlando to Colorado, Denver, Colorado, like if I'm driving in a car, there's a lot of ways you could do that. But again, there's much more efficient ways to drive, so that's really the question.
I like it. Now we will talk rest. 2 different kinds of rest. One will be rest between sets. Week 1, we're still doing week 1 for Mike and for Susan, and then overall rest. Let's say for their training week, how much rest are they getting?
That's the question. Okay, so number 1 was in between sets.
Yeah.
So again, based on training age from Mike, it depends on hypertrophy. Like we kind of touched on all these things. Every one of those things is going to have a different amount of rest and whatever he feels comfortable. So if he was a college athlete, he did CrossFit for 4 years. So if we're building to a 1 rep max heavy back squat, I might want him to take a good 3 or 4 minutes between attempts, or even as he's making his way up, and that's going to be done over 20 minutes or whatever. So he might take one effort at 225, and then he's going to take 3 or 4 minutes before he even goes to the next weight. Basically, the higher of an intensity that the thing is, the more rest you need to recover from that, so that you can go into the next effort with as much freshness, if we want to call it that, as possible. So for Susan, again, I would say we're going to probably focus more on kind of quicker things, and we're probably working on much lower intensities initially. And so she's probably not going to be at a true, especially if she's relatively new to lifting weights, she's probably not going to be at a true 1 rep max anytime soon. So she probably doesn't need as much rest between sets. And then it's just another part of this question, real quick, from a personal training or physical therapist standpoint, working with a human, is how are they a fast learner? So this comes back to personality, comes back to all these other factors that we're looking at. So if it's somebody who after every set, we want to be like, hey, what did you do wrong there? We need to have a conversation. Or is it just like, hey, like, you did this, next time do this, and so it can be very quick in terms of that. Or do they need that time to process? Do they need to go watch the video of what just happened and have a little bit more time? So those are things I'm thinking about when it comes to rest in between kind of sets. And again, for the most part, early on in training, we're probably going to go with higher reps, and like 3 sets of 10 is the really generic kind of physical therapy prescription type thing. But it might be 4 sets of 12 or whatever it is, just so we're getting that brain learning of the movement pattern. And because it's higher reps, you can't go as heavy, so you're less likely to get injured, and you're just getting that exposure and neurological adaptation. So again, it's going to be relatively short rests. And again, maybe we're doing unilateral work, so now I can do 12 reps on my left arm, and again, it's not super taxing, and then I can do 12 reps right into my right arm. And then I might even be able to do, because we're trying, maybe if we're doing an hour of personal training or whatever, I might even have you be doing some kind of stretch or mobilization. If we're doing that, I know you wanted to ask about supersets. That's one of my supersets that I do. Is cool. We just did a couple of shoulder things, and now let's do some like thoracic extension. And while you're there stretching, opening up your chest, undoing all your desk terribleness, that's when we're talking and decompressing and talking about the set that we just did and what you should think about on the next set. So it might be, just that almost constant motion and no real rest. But, it really depends on what that day is calling for, what that person's calling for, and just, again, that overall long-term concept.
I love what you just said. No one's doing that. No one is working mobility intraset. No.
I'll give credit to Aaron Horshig, Squat University. I think I've seen him post about that as well. And Tony Gentilcore also, who I mentioned earlier. Those are guys that I've seen incorporate these concepts as well. So, but I do think it needs to get out there for sure a lot more. Because again, you're resting, but you're doing something kind of productive with your rest. Whereas traditionally, I think you mentioned earlier, like in between sets, you get on your phone, you're kind of checking Instagram, whatever. You lose that mental component of being connected to the whole thing as well. So we can jump to the weekly kind of concept. And to me, that again significantly depends on what their cup looks like. So if this is their kind of cup or metaphorical cup, if their job gets them to that blue line and it's 50% of their stress, then their marriage is a little bit more stressful. Kids are a little more stressful. All that stuff it's how much can they handle and how much time are they putting into recovery? Because again, we talked about that cortisol drip, high intensity interval training is a stressor, and that could be enough to fill up that cup. So at the end of the day, the rest for the whole week needs to be a conversation around how's your sleep, how's your mindset, how's your connection with other humans. So I'm checking in on all these things with my clients, and that virtual platform allows me to do that. And I'd rather have 20 high tier clients who are checking in with me almost every day and are going to get better results. And even if they're only with me for 3 months or a full year, and then they can kind of move into, whatever other things. I think that constant contact, and for some people it's every other day or maybe just once a week, but that kind of constant contact, I think goes a long way to tell us, hey, like you had a not so great day. And not everyone's going to get a whoop, which again can tell me I had my booster the other day. So my physical recovery score was in orange, which is not great, so I chose not to work out after having my booster. Go figure. Crazy stuff. So yeah, I did go rock climbing today, even though it was orange. And rock climbing for me is one, even despite this, rock climbing for me is one of those things that, again, it's like a light. I think of it as like a 5 out of 10 RPE, rate of perceived exertion. Although there's some hard stuff, but my heart rate is, gets up a little bit over 100, maybe 120 on certain climbs that are a little harder. There's definitely parts where I'm like, oh, I'm going to challenge myself, and I'm doing all sorts of crazy moves and things like that. But yeah, come back to it. For both of our avatars, weekly rest is going to come back to what they can handle, and what the rest of their life looks like, which we didn't really go into. But those things are definitely need to be factored in. What their time availability is. Again, I can think of 5 clients I'm working with right now that just have all sorts of job stresses, including the guy on the other end of this call right now, who last week we tried to get this call done, and also a couple of coaches came down with COVID or whatever, and so it's like, yeah, maybe. And he was like, I can't get to this 20-minute workout. I'm like, it's all right, like it's okay. So when it comes to rest, again, it's better to I will always prioritize sleep, better nutrition, better stress relieving, whether that's jumping in the sauna, whether that's having a chilled out walk with your dog or whatever it is, to getting in the gym and feeling like you need to get your 20 minutes of high intensity training in, or heavy lifting.
So we're going to have a whole other episode on basic lifestyle guidelines and the other 23 hours of the day.
Yes.
But talking about stress and the stress bucket and all that we can go for hours on that. But how all that stuff is just more important than, the 1 hour that you're spending in the gym. And if you can get that stuff right, you might not have to even spend as much time in the gym.
Right. Yeah. And again, look, the basic ways to look at human movement, human performance, physical, everything. People tell me, what's the fastest way to lose 10 pounds? Or people ask me, what's the fastest way to lose 10 pounds? I tell them, you can probably chop your arm off like right around there, and you'll lose. That's about 10 pounds. And that's the fastest way to do it, if that's what you're asking. And of course, I'm doing that in jest. But again, when people talk about the best way to lose weight, especially if they're 20 or 30 pounds overweight, is to regulate your sleep. If you regulate your sleep, that's number one. Most people, it's not even food. Food to me is number 2. Sleep is number 1. But everything should focus on sleep. If you can get constant, solid, deep sleep, high quality sleep, which again, you can track with the Whoop here. I have my discount code in the thing. But yeah, seriously, sleep is number 1. Nutrition definitely needs to get dialed in. Again, this is basic lifestyle guidelines stuff. And then we're talking about movement. But yeah, movement, if you're trying to do movement and you don't have these other pieces, foundational components dialed in, and I think you and I, have either said this or heard it thousands and millions of times, it just needs to constantly be said. And if somebody out there is hearing it for the first time, I hope, it starts to, that light bulb goes off for you.
Yeah. So just myself, 2 years ago, I left nightlife for the first time. I've always had, as a coach, always had a couple jobs. So I always bartended or managed bars. My sleep was so messed up for so long, I didn't even know what real sleep or natural sleep was, or circadian rhythm or anything like that. The only change I made 2 years ago was sleep. Lost 38 pounds. One, I just had a baby and a bunch of other stuff, but the main factor for me getting healthier, let's not even talk about the weight loss, for me getting healthier was managing my sleep habits and sleeping at normal times. And I know that's difficult for some people that still work in nightlife or, work in hospitals, but it's so important. It's insanely important. And it's something that's probably just not even addressed as much as it should be.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of money to be made there. The things that are required for better sleep, either people can't agree on it, or again, there's not enough science to back it up. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to money. And again, if you go to folks who really study sleep, and I actually used to work with a sleep system company. Shout out to Reverie Sleep Systems, and that's the guy who actually got me into CrossFit, Martin Rawls Meehan. He's the president of that company. So yeah, but there's so much basic stuff you can do. Blackout curtains, again, setting alarms for the right time so that you probably later on don't need alarms. There's definitely nutritional components, when to stop caffeine, understanding all those things, to really optimize your sleep. And again, temperature of the room, all these different things. Again, when's a good time for your nervous system to start winding down? Foam roll before bed, timing of sauna versus ice baths and things like that. There's all these different ways to definitely manipulate it. But yeah, at the end of the day, it almost seems foreign. And again, a lot of some healthy behaviors have become a little bit more mainstream, like eating kale and smoothies and things like that, right? And now spin bike. But yeah, I think a lot of healthy things are still very like, oh, that's weird. Why are you eating liver? Like oh, I don't like the taste of liver. And it's like, well, yeah, it's like one of the healthiest things you could do for your body, like to improve the length of your life, the quality of your life. But no, and don't I didn't even mention heart. Don't eat heart, and like lung, but yeah, it freaks some people out. And to those people, I say there's pills you can take. You don't even taste it. Like, don't even worry about it. Like, it just take the pill, just like you take a multivitamin. And I think that taking those pills, by the way, I know we're on a huge tangent right now, but taking pills of heart, liver, kidney, organ meats is 1,000 times better than taking any multivitamin that you can find out there, which tend to have too much of stuff you don't need and not enough of the stuff you do need. And of course, at the end of the day, a personalized, individualized prescription is always going to be best. But yeah, again, I'm off on my tangent to bring it to what questions you have, and we're a little over an hour, so totally up to you if you want to save the rest for part 2.
I will, because I want to keep these to an hour. I do want to keep these to an hour, but I do have a ton of other questions, and we'll talk about some.
He sent me a very long list, folks.
Yeah.
Very long list.
Yeah, like you've just always been my go-to. You believe in science, and spent a lot of money on education. So
yeah, there's the questions.
Yeah.
They're all there. Yes, I did spend a lot of money on education.
More questions, so I think we'll clean this up.
Yeah, and again, for anyone who made it this far, listened, we'd love to hear if you like this format, going through the avatars. If you want us to use more of you as an avatar, I think we can touch base on some of that stuff. Or if you just want to jump on and be the person we talk about all these concepts about. I think that's one thing. And again, we've kind of touched on it with the Demand Better podcast. And we're actually, our next episode, we're taking a girl I went to high school with that my co-host Corona actually knows pretty well. Erin, who's she hosted us on one of the previous episodes, but we're going to pretty much do that where we're going to take her as the case study. And we're going to say, okay, so Corona's looked at you. I've looked at you in some different ways in our assessments. And now we're going to talk to her right there live as we're going through. Like, she wants to run marathon. She just ran the New York City Marathon. She had a knee brace on. I'm like, I don't know if I agree with you doing that. Maybe it was necessary to run the marathon. And if she got through that, but now it's like, well, where do we go from here? How do we, if you want to keep running marathons, what's the best way to do that? For her, I'm just gonna, for anyone again, and I don't think she's gonna listen to this just yet, because we're shooting that in about a week. But she needs to start strength training. And Corona and I both agree on that. That's the spoiler alert for anybody who's going to tune into that episode. But but definitely, I just wanted to say, anyone who made it this far, again, for sure, we appreciate you. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, all that. But yeah, touch base with one of us. We're pretty easy to get in contact with. You want to tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at Instagram, Adam Caratini. It's my first and last name. Or you can email me at adam.caratini@gmail.com.
Dope. All right, guys, we will cut it out there. Just under an hour and 10 minutes. And appreciate you bearing with my tangents and beautiful mind, brain, and all that stuff. And yeah, appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.